Well, thank you for joining me today. My name is Ruth Gawthorpe. I'm the CEO of an organisation called the Smart Working Revolution. I actually started implementing smart working around 20 years ago, as Richard said, in an organisation called Domestic General, which you'll probably be aware of. And what we found was that the calls dropped off in the contact centre between 12 and 2. And so the workforce planning guys wanted us to split the shift. So I said, well, I don't want to do that because we'll lose people. I'm an HR director by trade. And so overnight, I came up with this idea whereby we would pilot a team of about 12 people. We would give them gym membership to the Virgin Gym next door but one. And they would go to the gym for an hour together, and then they'd come back and they'd have lunch together and take up those 2 hours. We didn't have to pay them during that period. And so productivity levels went back up because they weren't being paid. Everybody seemed to be really happy with the situation, particularly the accountants, because we were saving money through that. After about 6 weeks, we found that absence absolutely dropped off a cliff, and so they were actually as fit as butcher's dogs. It was tremendous, and so we also, at the same time, my co-founder in Smart Working Revolution, he just qualified as an NLP practitioner, and so he got in with this team and gave them some of what I call his brain food. And remarkably, the sales on that team went up by 19%. So the accountants loved it. The operations director thought it was phenomenal. And he said, I like this. It's really smart. Can we have some more of this? So within Domestic and General, over the next few years, whilst I was there, we put in lots and lots of different smart working options, anything from term time teams to seasonal teams. We had a team called the Winter Warmers. The good people of Nottingham don't like to switch the heating on during the winter time, but they were happy to come and cuddle up in the contact centre. And that worked really, really well because we were able to bring these people back year after year. Some of them had taken early retirement, and it meant that we could cover that seasonal blip. So if we then, I then went on to work for other organisations, and HCL Technology and a number of travel companies as well, and implemented different forms of smart working there. About 7 years ago, I had an operation on my back, and when I woke up, they told me that I'd moved. I ended up in a wheelchair for a year, and I've not been able to move my right foot since that time, which is not very good because my hobby was long distance walking. So now it's sort of short distance hobbling. But what it made me realise was that not everybody can do the commute. They can't do this 9 to 5, Monday to Friday fix that we seem to have adhered to for generations. And so a couple of years back, Ollie and I were talking. So Ollie's the guy who went in and did the NLP training with the Sky team on the warranty side. And we decided that we'd put to use some of the tools and the techniques that we'd pulled together over the last few years. So that's a little bit about the Smart Working Revolution. Now I'm going to see if I can share, and then I'll take you through a few slides. Let's just minimize that. Have you got that, Richard? Just thumbs up if you have. Yeah, okay. Fantastic. So what I'll do is I'll take you through a few slides and introduce you to a few different concepts that will get your brain racing, I think. Okay, so if you think about your organisation and where are you now, I'll do a whistle-stop tour through this hierarchy. So if we look at tier 0, the one at the bottom, these are the workers who have to be physically present. So it's a job that can't be done unless you're physically there to do it, like a builder, a plumber, an electrician, a train driver, a bus driver, hairdresser, dentist, surgeon, barman, and so on. But there are still many smart options that can be applied to this category. So they could have things like flexible start and finish times, part-time, annualised hours, or compressed weeks. And it will be options that match the customer demand, and that's really crucial as we talk through this presentation. The problem is that for decades, traditional leaders have been pushing other office-based roles unnecessarily into this category. So in there, we find roles such as recruitment, accountants, claims handlers, contact centre advisors, GPs to some extent, and lots of other admin-based roles, and probably some of your roles as well. If you look at tier 1, there were millions of leaders who were caught napping when lockdown occurred. They found it difficult to move to a remote workforce, and it actually did take them some time to adapt. For decades, these people have led by presenteeism, and they've required people to be present in the office. And they've got this Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 fixed mindset. If you think about it, we've all been getting on the same buses, on the same trains, on the same motorways, at the same time, going into the same city, getting into the office, and then when we get there, what do? We email the person next to us. It really is quite bizarre. If you look at tier 2 then, this is where most of the traditional leaders are now sitting at the moment. And they had to take a leap of faith almost overnight. And they had to take that leap of faith to trust their people. They've learned how to use Teams or WebEx or Zoom, and they have noticed that productivity has gone through the roof. Yes, it's a bit tricky doing your board meetings, collaborating or training, but we are coping. So these people are trialing remote, and they're getting smarter about it. There's a jigsaw puzzle of decisions awaiting this category of people if they're going to safely navigate COVID-19 and the easing of lockdown. And I think it'll be really interesting to see whether these people do go back down to tier 1. At tier 3, you've got smart leaders who are already there. They were the ones that were able to move to a full remote workforce overnight. So I give you, for example, Sam White and Freedom Group, and also Saga, who we have done work with we started working with them about 18 months ago, and they adopted 3 different types of smart working. One was flexible start and finish times, and the second one was remote working, but it was combined with annualised hours to cover the storm damage time within their business. So at tier 3, you've got people who are already there. The UK has traditionally had a poor record for investing in technology skills and training. So many leaders were actually afraid of modern technology before lockdown. And again, talking to Sam White, she said, I've had to learn to use Zoom, Ruth, and I hated it before, and I love it now. So I think that leaders in this category will begin to show the necessary confidence to introduce more modern technology. I think they'll, for example, become more adept at using CRM. Apparently the UK falls behind in the use of CRM. And I think in this situation, it's started to affect a lot of organisations. Tier 4, this is where we begin to see organisations that have sort of nailed the smart and distributed team management, and they're building two-way trust. And trust becomes the oil in the successful smart workforce. And each business designs its own unique workforce based on the customer peaks and troughs. And they also build the culture so that it does support two-way trust. And you've got to have top-down leadership skills and bottom-up smart worker skills to really make this rock and roll. The leaders in this category, they really understand what makes each of their people tick, and they know how to motivate them. And they manage the work based on outcomes. Presenteeism is a thing of the past for these leaders. Motivation and productivity really skyrockets at this level. And then at tier 5, this is where the smart organisations of the future will move to. And they're led by leaders who recognise the workplace is a fascinating, dynamic, virtual and evolutionary organism that will have to adapt to new environmental factors as they arrive. They'll have to adapt to new customer demand and social norms. And these leaders realise that work happens in brains, not offices. So it'd be useful for you to think about where you are within that hierarchy. Whichever place you are in the hierarchy, we have got a kick-ass call to action. We're going to have to restart, rebuild and renew. We're going to have to think through every role, every worker, every workplace scenario and what it means for a return to work post-lockdown. Social distancing in the workplace and how you'll ensure that your workforce is inclusive of the vulnerable will need to be something that you will think about if you are a leader. There's going to be still millions of people who aren't going to be able to go back into a workplace until there's a vaccine around. So I think it's a good chance for you to look at what your workforce will look like post-lockdown. So the thing to do is, when you're designing your smart workforce, is to consider customer demand in the past and think about what that's going to look like in the future. How has the operation changed for you, and how has it changed during lockdown? We often suggest a bit of root cause analysis of past challenges to mitigate against the issues in the future. We do a session on root cause analysis using the story of the Titanic, by the way. We always do something a bit different. It's a good opportunity for you here to scenario plan, to pilot and to tweak and when you're designing your smart workforce. Remember that as we go through this transition phase, the model will morph into your future model. So you need to build that action plan for the future, but build it now. And also build your new culture into it. If you don't drive the culture, it will drive itself and you'll end up in the passenger seat. And one of our top tips is, why not run a what if campaign with your people, get their ideas on what your smart workforce should look like. One of the reasons that we always suggest sort of 2 or 3 options in terms of your organisation is that people like choice. And they'll normally nudge towards the choice that suits them most. We have got a workforce model. It's actually got 50 different options in it. This is the basic workforce model. So we split it by flexible location and flexible contracting hours. So for example, in the hub category, you could have a corporate hub, you could have a co-working hub, and you could also have an innovation hub. So this is where you're probably, if you're producing a product, for example, then you might have an innovation hub that is set apart from the rest of the organisation, where people can, where the people within it are not held back from what's happened in the past. So it enables that creativity and that innovation. Co-working hubs are, as you know, are popping up all over the place. We've got a beautiful one in Newquay here. So if you're down in the summer or whenever, you can come back down, pop into a place called Sea Space, and it will be set up for social distancing going forward. Obviously, different types of mobile working, maybe working mobile direct from home or from the office, or maybe some other hub that you check into to do a mobile job. Mobile, by the way, if you had a continuum of the most difficult smart working options. On at the easy end, you've got flexible start and finish times. At the most difficult end is mobile, because people suffer from what we call techno stress, trying to get to appointments in the traffic and so on. And then that's quickly followed by remote working. So you could have people working at home, you could have people working in a client office, and you could have what we call a distributed team, which is where they may be in the office, they may be working at home, they could be in a hub, they may be mobile, but we're all connected. And then in the office, obviously, we're not going to be doing hot desking for a long time to come, and you're going to have spend quite a lot of money, I think, rejigging your office. So I think there's a lot of things to think about with these expensive offices, and whether we're going to pump any more money into those, or whether we can use them for collaboration maybe once a week. And then lots of different flexible contracts and hours, part-time day, part-time week, 4-day weeks, compressed hours, demand-led 24/7. Global organisations do something called baton passing. So if you think about I would say somebody like Disney, for example, when they're building their cartoons and what have you, they baton pass them around the world so that they can be working 24/7, and quite a lot of organisations like Airbnb use that as well. Unique shifts that we've talked about, term time, gym shifts, seasonal cover. We're implementing another one called, we call it 13-1. That means for most of 13 out of 13 days a fortnight, you just have one day in the office, or it could be that you just have one day a week in the office. But it's about what suits your organisation. And so the trick with all of this is to think about the customer demand, the peaks and the troughs, and then work that back into the business, and then work that back into these wonderful little smart working shifts and types. And you can combine those, so lots of our clients combine the different types of options from the smart workforce model. Top tip: different options require different personal aptitudes. We started off thinking that introverts would make the best remote workers, and we were absolutely wrong. Extroverts make the best remote workers because they take the time to make contact with their boss, their clients, and their peers. Introverts actually love hubs. They like getting in the hidey hole, getting their heads down, really productive, and they'll come out and have a listen if they hear something that interests them. You'll very often note introverts in open plan offices because they're the ones wearing headphones because they can't stand the distractions. Right, moving on. Just a couple of benefits here. I'm not going to pick them all out, but there are benefits right across the board. We normally see productivity rise by 13% if it's effectively deployed, whichever smart working option it is. And it's about, improving the quality of life for your people and increased job satisfaction and well-being. But also the customer generally does better because you can broaden out your service so that if your customers want a service at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, then if people aren't having to travel into an office, if they can do it in the hub or in their own home, they're more likely to put their hands up to cover that shift. And for society, it's a fairer distribution of work and improved productivity of the nation. And I think what we've seen with lockdown is more focus on family. When you're implementing smart working, you need to do that feasibility study up front. We do it in a day. Sometimes with some organisations, they want it over a longer period. So we have done one that lasted about 5 months with a borough council, then pilot, then implement. Remember to put your leadership skills in place, but also your smart team skills in place. That's the only way that you'll make it work. And that's what a lot of organisations have missed out on because they had to go to lockdown overnight. As I said earlier, work happens in brains, not offices. These are the three crucial skills that you'll need to look at when you're recruiting people to work remotely in particular, but maybe also in hubs. So it's about employees who stay focused on productivity whilst they're working remotely. They communicate well and they take the initiative. And also this term resilience, the tendency to deal effectively with strain and difficulty when it occurs. And when you're building a smart workforce, and if they are going to be working in hubs or remotely or distributed, then honestly, concentrate on that resilience. These are some of the people that we work with. We do a lot of work with the British Chambers of Commerce. You can see that I've worked with BGL, who you're probably aware of. We do a lot of work with Crowdfunder, who are based down here as well. We have a programme that can help you go through designing your smart workforce. So I think there we go. Let me stop sharing and then I can take some questions.
Brilliant. Firstly, thank you very much for that, Ruth. That was quite an insightful view of smart working. What I kind of took from that is that smart doesn't actually mean remote. It is how to work smarter. One of the questions that I had, and I'll just to kick off, is about kind of getting effective staff engagement with this process. There's a lot of people in organisations who brainstorm just from the top and believe that their way is the highway, is the best way. How do you get effective staff engagement across the organisation, where you actually see that you, instead of just paying lip service, you're actually actively engaging with the members of staff and finding out what they want?
Yeah, I think, it does come from the top. You're absolutely right. And some leaders at the top, they need to have their fixed mindset shifted. And we're working with an organisation at the moment, actually, who the top dog, he doesn't want to even consider anything other than a return to the workplace. Whereas the HRD, the HR director, can see that they're going to lose people unless they do. And so we're doing some coaching with the HRD on language that he should use to start to try to unfix this fixed mindset. And so sometimes you have to start at that level. When you've got a thoughtful leader, like Sam White, like Gary from Saga or Rob from Crowdfunder, you give them more of an open book. And they absolutely see the common sense in bringing people in and sharing those ideas. And if honestly, when we start with just the subject of smart working options, it tends to lead to much more creative thinking around all sorts of other ways of working. So we believe that this is not just about smart working, this is more of a business wisdom, but it is about unfixing those mindsets. Now, sometimes you get them at the top, sometimes it's middle management who don't want to lose control. And sometimes it will be people, who are working in the teams who just don't get it. And a lot of it's about fear, that they're afraid of change and losing control. Does that help?
So yeah, we've got to try and, you mentioned trust quite a lot in your presentation. So it's getting people to not be afraid of change. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask Ruth? Charlotte made a comment. She thought that the tools that you mentioned would be very important to help our economy recover post-COVID. Do you think that's a fair point?
I do indeed, and I think that I think that's why I say it's a kick-ass call to action. I think leaders have really got to step up to the plate. I think that workers will demand more flexible forms of working going forward now, and those organisations that don't give those will quite frankly be left in the dark. You know, there will be some dinosaurs that will want to go back into the office, but there'll be a lot of organisations. We're working with one tomorrow, and the guy has said, I'm dropping my lease in June. I'm not renewing it. We're gonna work from a hub and collaborate there. He's going to collaborate once a week. So I think there's lots of people thinking about this now, Richard.
Anybody else got any questions? I've got a few more, but if anybody wants to fire in, just wave your hand or unmute yourself. Andy.
Ruth, thanks very much for the presentation. Fascinating stuff. A quick one for me. I think when we talk about the return to work in the COVID-19 environment, I think leaders, and I'd be interested in your view on this, are going to really need to appreciate personal choice in terms of you can't force people back into the office. And we've run a survey internally within Amlin, and something like 75% of people said they wouldn't be comfortable getting back on the tube and trains in the current environment until there's much more of a plan in terms of track and trace, etc. Does that resonate with you in terms of other organisations and the approaches that they're taking?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And the reason behind that is this brain food again, as I call it. So your brain protects you from birth. You know, it's been there looking after us, making sure that we survive. And up until a couple of months ago, your brain was telling you that it was safe to commute. Now your brain is telling you it's not safe to commute. And it's difficult to argue with your brain. And whoever your boss is, it's difficult for your boss to argue with your brain, because your brain's there to help you to survive. So we've suddenly gone from thinking that the commute is safe to saying it's not safe, and actually working from home is safe. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who will struggle mentally with this and be very, very anxious. And I really do believe that the best leaders will understand this, and they'll think about what sort of smart options they can build into their workforce model. and they will give more choice. And I think some people will be dying to get back into the office, and they'll be happy to take the risk on the tube or wherever. And then there'll be others who are so vulnerable that they cannot return to the office until we've got a vaccine, and there'll be millions of people in that category.
Thank you, Ruth. Simon, you had a question about tax implications of baton passing.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Of particular interest, you may pick up a certain accent, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could be the baton passing guy in New Zealand, where people give their claims issues to overnight, and I turn them around in reports overnight so they get them in the morning from New Zealand. And I just thought that would be brilliant. But I think I'm going to run into a bit of headwind over certain tax complications when I post that idea. Do you know if that works?
Well, I'm not sure how it works from a tax perspective, because I'm an HR director and I can hardly add up as it is. But what I do know is that a lot of organisations are using this scenario. So what I can do is probably let you have a few of the case studies that we've got, and there's, you know, certainly there's a lot of it around. Some of it will be back office processing. You know, so for example, Equinity use that, and I'm sure that some of the other insurance organisations use it with their back office processing.
Yeah, I think that's a bit different, because they'll be hiring teams that will be remunerated in India or the country that they have the back office function. In this case, I'm an insurance solicitor who's sort of front lines, so I'd still be to some extent client facing. So I'd still have to keep odd hours to be in touch with the UK, but at the same time, I don't see why I couldn't do my whole job essentially from New Zealand, provided I worked sort of midnight or midday to midnight instead of traditional hours. Yeah,
I agree with you. I'll send the case studies that we've got onto Richard, and you know, it's probably something worth pursuing. I think it's a great idea, but yeah, I can imagine the tax issues will be one hurdle that you'll have to overcome. But there's always hurdles with these, and I'll be interested to see how you proceed with it. So let me know.
Katie, Gawthorpe, you had a question.
Hi Ruth, thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting. I think it's just to expand on that point of the flexibility. Like personally, I would get on a train tomorrow, I'd get on a plane tomorrow. I want to get on with my life and go back to work and that kind of thing. And I think part of it is recognizing that there are people who want to be in the office and around other people.
Yeah.
I chose a job that had an office space because I don't like homework or being based at home. I don't enjoy getting on the train, but I enjoy that process of going to work, getting ready for work, going to work, and you kind of, for me, that I get into that mindset. And also it's just being around your colleagues and sharing those ideas and that kind of thing. And I struggle with thinking that that's as effective when you're all remote and you're doing things via conference calls and that kind of thing. And certainly there's some conversations certainly that I've had, I'm client facing with clients that were really difficult over a conference call that face to face would have been far more effective, just because there were, issues that need to be sorted out and whatever. And for me, I just struggle with that remote idea all the time, or having that permanently.
Yeah, and I think that's why you need to look at it from the smart workforce option, which is not just about remote work. It's about all of those combinations and finding out what not only suits your customers, but what suits the people within your organisation as well. It could be that, you have maybe a hybrid version of things where you work from home a couple of days and you work in an office 3 days, or you go to a local hub and you meet different people there instead of just people from the office. You see people from different industries with different stories to tell you. So I think it can be mixed up, and it can be really exciting actually for somebody like you to have a number of different options and give you more choice.
I think I did use the phrase to my boss the other day, I want my cake and eat it. The best bits of working from home with the best bits of working in the office,
Yeah, and I just don't see what's wrong with that. If you're working in an office, your productivity is often lower because of all of the distractions, and there's lots of case studies around that. And it takes you, if somebody's distracted you, then it takes you 20 minutes to gain your focus back again. And that's why, with smart working, we find that remote working is tremendously more productive, probably around about 20%. But a combination of them is around about 13%. So it's certainly worth looking at. And also think about these expensive leases. Do we really need to have these big, shiny coronavirus factories in our cities? Or can we do it more cost effectively and cut down on the travel and the carbon footprint? I just think, it's a great big what if now.
Interesting you mentioned the office and the leases there, Ruth. I was speaking to Peter Blanc the other day, and he was thinking, why on earth am I paying a huge amount of rent for my presence in London? My brother works for DWF, and they've, well before COVID, they moved to the walkie-talkie and found that it was too expensive. So they had started a process of shift work, of coming in a couple of days a week. The question on that, though, is, and it kind of leads to what Katie has said, is that some people, how do you kind of do that without kind of saying, without being seen as, I'm just doing this to cut costs. I'm not doing it because I care about my staff. I'm just doing it because actually it's in my financial interest as a business owner to do that.
Well, I think that many leaders come at it from many different angles, to be honest. So, some organisations that we've worked with have said we are literally running out of space here, Ruth, and I don't want to have to spend any more money on space. So I want to try and use the facility that we've got more cost effectively. Just before lockdown, CIPD did a big survey, and 85% of the UK workforce, from the survey that they did, it seems like want some form of smart working option. So the majority of us are already with the leader that says, I want to look at smart working and I want to try and reduce my costs down. And I think most workers would welcome it, and it would be the first thing they'd say to their boss, you can cut down on the cost of your office space, because we know that, you know, the accountants and the bosses are always thinking about how they could do things more cost effectively. Of course they are. But I always say to leaders, think about the customer first. What's the customer demand? Where are your peaks and troughs? Build that back into your business. We come up with some wonderful smart working options, you know, things like the one that Saga did there. And that works really well for the staff as well. I just think you get tremendous buy-in, to be honest, now.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Ruth? We kind of.
Can I ask a question? What have you learned from the whole remote working exercise? How's it been for you guys?
Small grumble, but I can't stand my dining room chairs anymore. Bloody back.
Yeah, you need to roll up a towel and stick it in there.
Yeah,
I do think we'll see an increase in EL claims coming out of this, Simon. You could be quite busy. But
Yeah.
Rob, you've kind of mute you a second here. Right, you're unmuting. Okay, okay, you unmute yourself, Rob.
Yourself. I was just writing a letter saying I'm going to have to dash in 1 second, so I'm going to have to be quite quick, I'm afraid.
Very good. You've kind of moved to Gresham. You have a bit more of a remote system already. When going from travellers being in the office to having a more remote workforce, not London-based as you are at the moment. Is there anything resonate there with you?
Yeah, absolutely, and all the stuff that Ruth's been talking today about, we've been talking about over the last month or so anyway, about, you know, can we move to a more remote, to a smarter workforce and a better way of doing it. We've found, and Ruth touched on this right at the start, that the efficiencies of people have been far greater than I thought they'd be. We've found new and better ways of measuring performance and productivity. And that sort of forced our hand. I thought that we measured quite well before. Actually, we didn't. We can really measure now. And the one thing, and again, Ruth touched on this right at the start, I've always been reticent about letting too many people work at home because of a trust issue, because I always think it's a nice sunny day. Are they really going to be working all day, or are they going to be in the garden or on the golf course? But the fact is, we've realised that actually you can totally trust people. You can trust them also. You know, the rigidity of a set hours is a bit meaningless. Can the work be done? I think we've been far more flexible around people having to sort of families looking after kids and spouses, partners working, and so actually having to do it in shifts to look after kids. Our kids are now looking to go, there's talk about going back to school soon. We've got to work out how we can get into school safely. And that means flexibility for us, and that'd be the same for all parents. So there's a load of things happening here that's given us really good food for thought, and I think we will end up being a much smarter organisation as a result of it. And a lot of what you've said today, Ruth, has been excellent, and really a lot of, you know, putting some context in the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think your comment about rigidity is really interesting, because they don't need rigidity when they're working from home, but they certainly need routine. Otherwise, you become overwhelmed with all of the different things that you've got to juggle. So, you know, we've been suggesting to our clients that they put in meetings at the same time every week or the same time every day, so that it becomes a routine, and it takes away that decision making that tends to overwhelm people if they're managing the kids, the work. and everything else, you know. So
Well,
yeah, I think it's very true, and actually it's much easier to measure a person's productivity and output when they are working remotely. It just becomes really clear, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And to your point there, you know, we now do an 8:30 video conference call with the whole team every morning. We do it across the business, every team in all of our businesses do it. And that is the start of a routine for people. You know, they will be up and ready and ready for work at 8:30. You know, not just falling out of bed at 8:25. We want them ready for work then. Half-hour meeting, set out the agenda for the day, what's expected of everyone, etc. And actually just giving people that routine, as you say, of this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to measure it, and people are responding to it.
Yeah,
you know, it's great.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you have to be aware of is that some people won't be able to cut off from work. So at the same time as you've got the routine at the beginning of the day, you've got to sort of have one at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And stopping is sometimes difficult. And it's my wife drags me away to say, no, dinner is ready. You've got to stop work now. You know, I'm sure other people find that.
For me, it's my glass of prosecco that calls me most evenings.
Yeah,
I think the interesting thing for me out of all of this is I think it's really focused communication. I find there's a lot less extraneous communication, which means that it feels like I'm being much more productive, getting much more done at home.
Yeah, I'm sure that you are. So these people who stop by your desk and distract you for half an hour, or somebody who's having a conversation within hearing about the football last night or what they were watching on TV, and you haven't got that, so you can just get on and get your head down. Are you introvert or extrovert?
I can be a bit of both. I'd probably say I'm an extrovert, to be honest.
Yeah. So you probably join in, you see. So that's probably.
Well, yeah. I think the other thing is that I'm quite easily distracted. I like bright, new, shiny things. So anything new and interesting going on, I want to sort of find out what's going on. So it's removed quite a few distractions, I must admit.
Oh, so you've enjoyed it, have you, to a certain extent?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's changed people's outlooks, hasn't it? You know, changed your outlook on everything. Somebody's just written down their teachers should get paid more. And I think it's probably done us a lot of good having to do the homeschooling, because, I mean, they are just angels, aren't they, in what they do?
Yeah, very much so. You appreciate how much patience they've got, but I suppose it's always easy when it's someone else's kids. Sorry, Rob?
It's because your wife's a teacher.
She's not an angel.
Oh, I bet she is. Oh.
Just finally, Ruth, any kind of tips and hints on doing video calls? The do's and don'ts of what of being on a Zoom call. Any suggestions?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we do some sessions on this. We've got some on our website. But in terms of Zoom sessions, for example, if you're doing one with your team, we often suggest. So we trialed this with one of our clients, and what they do now is they set the subject for the meeting, and they ask each of the team members to just jot down a few of their thoughts about that particular subject. And then the first 10 minutes of the meeting, all of the team spend time reading what one another has put. And that means then that you don't have this thing where everybody follows the leader's views. You're hearing everybody's views. And it leads to much better collaboration. And the other tip that I'd give if you're managing a distributed team is use what we call the round robin technique, so that you don't miss anybody out, because the quiet people tend to keep themselves to themselves, and the noisy people, you hear from them all of the time. Now that happens in the workplace, as we know, but it tends to happen more on conference calls, video conferencing calls. So there's just two little techniques there. And also pick up on people's on the social cues, on people's body language, and if you think that someone's feeling a little bit anxious or a bit down, don't mention it in that particular call, but make sure that you have an extra call with them on a one-to-one basis.
Anybody else finish off? Have people found this as a catch up on the City Forum? Are people happy to see if we could organise a couple more?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, again, thank you very much, Ruth. You've left us a lot to think about. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of this. I'm an eternal optimist. I really think that I really do think that we need to take what we've learned here and don't go back to our bad old ways. I think we need to push forwards, and hopefully we'll see the rejuvenation of places like Cornwall and great improvements in the economy of Cornwall. The high street may come back again, and that was really Sam. So yeah, so that's brilliant, and hopefully that we'll all take this away into our workplaces. And you've shared your website with us. I will do a follow up to all members and share the video if you're happy with that, and we hopefully will be be in touch soon. So thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and I hope to speak to you all very shortly.